Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to help you write an answer to the question about explaining the formation of either an arete or a pyramidal peak. Now, because I'm going to use the tutorial to explain both of these features, the first part of the tutorial will tell you the sequence of points you need to write for the arete, and then I'll show you how to finish off your answer if it was the arete you were writing. And then what I'll show you at the end of the tutorial is how to add a couple of more sentences to turn your answer into an answer on the pyramidal peak. All you've got to do is just change the start of your answer, which would be an arete is formed by or a pyramidal peak is formed by. But they both go through the same steps. What I'd also suggest you do before you go any further with this tutorial is you might want to go back and watch the Corrie tutorial if you haven't done so already, because both of these features, the arete and the pyramidal peak, are products of the Corrie because of the way the Corrie is formed. One final point I should make is that you've got to check carefully what your question requires you to do. Your question may require you to draw a diagram, and it will tell you whether you must draw a diagram or whether you may. If it says you may, then you're not required to. Also, when drawing a diagram, remember, if you are going to draw a diagram, then there's no point just adding labels. You should turn your labels into what we call annotations, which are where there's a full sentence explaining what the diagram is showing, and you might want to put a series of these. And that would look a little bit like, I'll just show you this here. So you'd have your diagram that you've drawn with full sentences explaining that. And if you're going to say, for example, plucking and abrasion, which features in this answer, you'd actually want to tell me what plucking and abrasion were. Okay, let's get started. What's the very first thing you're going to want to write? Well, you're going to want to say that an arete is formed because of the formation of two corries forming side by side on a mountain. Okay, that's statement number one that will get you a mark. Okay, now let's just explore what you're then going to say. You're then going to say a corrie itself is formed by a glacier forming in a hollow on a mountainside. Okay, that's a mark. You might want to then say it forms in these hollows high in the mountains because temperatures are much colder here. Second mark you might go for is by telling me how the glacier actually forms. So that's by snow falling in the winter, not melting in the summer because it's an ice age, and then the following snow the year after then piles on top of the snow that fell the year before, and gradually when this repeats year after year, it gets compressed into ice. In simple language, you would just say the glacier is formed by layers of snow compressing gradually down to glacial ice over many years. Okay, so there's your second point. Now you want to say that the glacier starts to move inside this hollow, and as it moves, because of rotational slip and because of gravity, the force of gravity, it starts to erode the mountainside, deepening the hollow. You're then going to want to say it does this through plucking and abrasion, and you're then going to want to tell me what these two are. So we've repeated this in the other two videos already done on U-shaped valleys and corries. But plucking is where, abrasion is where rock that is contained within the glacier, frozen inside the glacier, scrapes along the mountainside, deepening it and eroding it. And a bit like sandpaper, that's another comparison you can make with abrasion. And plucking is where the glacier freezes to the mountain and actually then rips the rock away from the mountain in a process known as plucking. Okay, over time, those two processes will deepen the hollow. Now, when two glaciers are doing this next to each other on the mountainside, they will gradually erode towards each other. So this glacier would have been eroding this way, and this glacier would have been eroded this way, until a narrow ridge is left between the two corries. Now, this is the arete. One final point you can say on the arete is that since the Ice Age, process of weathering like freeze-thaw have continued to narrow and sharpen this knife-edged ridge. And you could then tell me that freeze-thaw is where water gets into cracks, and at night it freezes, it expands, which puts pressure on the cracks, and eventually rock breaks off the mountain, which would further sharpen it. Now, if you were asked about the arete, this is where you'd finish your answer. If the question was about a pyramidal peak, you would then say, when three or more corries form on the mountainside, multiple aretes will form. We can see this in the diagram here. And the point at which they meet at the summit is known as the pyramidal peak. That will get you a mark. You could then add the point I said earlier about the arete being sharpened. You could say the same for the pyramidal peak, that since the Ice Age, freeze-thaw weathering has continued to sharpen this point. This is where and you tell me about water getting into cracks, expanding, and so on. Tell me what freeze thaw is. Okay. You need to be able to identify the pyramidal peak and the arete on an Ordnance Survey map, along with the corrie and U-shaped valley. They're the common features that you're asked to be able to identify using contour patterns and other features. So make sure you can do that as well. And to practice that, you can go to the area on the revision site that looks at map skills, landscape map skills.